Welcome back. Welcome back to the Detroit is Different podcast studios. And in studio, I have somebody that definitely is native to the city of Detroit, but like back here, grounds, boots on the ground, and even talking about connecting with family places. Writing, definitely in the media space, and you may actually have his book about how to, maneuver and be in the city of Detroit, amongst other things of helping young Black men and more. Aaron Foley, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm blessed. I'm happy to be here, and I'm wishing it was not 15 degrees outside. So.
Oh man, you, me, and many others, definitely attended school in an era where I think it had to be almost like at least half for the snow to miss. But now it's like, man, it's too cold. It's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, why do I, I almost said, why do I live here? No, I chose to come back here, but I forgot about.
Oh yeah, it's definitely this is Detroit time right now. Yeah. But as I uplifted before, definitely writing, journalism, and even more creative as well. And we start these journeys always family. Mm-hmm. So your family, what's the connection? How many generations deep are you guys to Detroit?
It depends on which side of the family we're talking about.
Okay.
Let's on my mother's side of the family, they came up here from South Carolina.
Okay.
My great-grandparents over there, okay, I guess you can say 4 generations. Mm-hmm. They had a house in Conant Gardens.
Okay.
East side. That's where my grandmother, all her siblings grew up. If you look at my mother's father's side of the family, that would also be 4 generations. His mother and all her siblings, one by one, came up from Alabama, and they were in the North End.
Okay.
And so and then, my dad's side came to Ypsilanti. And so, we all over the place. But yeah, we'll say 4 generations.
Okay, that's definitely some roots that go far back. And you mentioned 2 historic communities, one of which we were kind of already talking about. Conant Gardens is one of the most I'm gonna just say that. One of the most historic Black communities, as this was one of the communities where Black folks could move outside of Black Bottom at an early age. So you still have some families that go back there generations, almost like the 4 or 5, maybe even like, some 6 generations, depending upon where we at in the family, and very close-knit community as well. And some of the stories, the culture over there it's a community that almost feels like a Family Matters episode or something sometimes when you over that way. It's like they know each other. They connect with one another, and it passes from generation to generation. What do you remember about that community as a kid?
I remember, first of all, my great-grandparents bought a house over there, and they were one of those families. They were among those first Black families, and I was going back in the archives of the Michigan Chronicle, and there's stories in there about white residents trying to keep Black folks out of there, right? Uh-huh. And so they were one of those ones. And what I remember most about the house, it went from my great-grandparents to one of their daughters, my grandmother's sister. And she had the house till she passed. Her 2 daughters intermittently lived there on and off, the whole time. But the house, my great aunt was a fashion designer, a notable fashion designer, and it's almost kind of lost to history. Again, shout out to the Michigan Chronicle, because they were, every single thing that was going on in Conant Gardens, the Michigan Chronicle wrote about it.
Yes.
Every little tea gathering, every church function and stuff like that. And there was an entire community of creatives over there, including my great aunt, who all of the sisters in the family, my grandmother included, knew how to sew a dress. They could, make whatever, but she was really working with different patterns, doing custom designs, couture, maybe, if you will. She had a client base of all of these Black folks who were building that middle class. And what's one of the things you do when you start getting money is getting custom made clothes. And she was, she was the seamstress for everyone, and she had fashion shows inside the house. And so there's pictures from that. The models would be like girls in the neighborhood,
Mm,
my grandmother's sisters and whatnot.
mm,
And what I remember most about the house as it went down the years, and I was a kid visiting there because my grandmother would take me there, and she like, this is where
mhm,
I was when I was a little girl. And in my mind, I'm just like, everything's black and white.
mhm, mhm,
Was slavery still going on? No, no, but just point. But the house was full of fabric. The house
mm.
was full of just like gorgeous like silk
Wow.
and stuff like that because my great aunt continued sewing well into her like 50s and 60s. And so
Mm.
you would go there and you remember like JoAnn Fabrics and Minnesota
Yeah,
that's what the house looked like because she was
wow.
just constantly creating. And so that's what I remember most about the house. That and there was a rose garden,
Mm,
rose bushes in the backyard, and
mhm,
I have this, framed photo of my grandmother. She went to Pershing High School. I believe, she graduated in 1951.
mm.
On the day of her graduation, every this is when Black folks first started buying cameras and stuff like that, and we're documenting everything. I have a picture of my grandmother in the dress that she wore to her graduation, standing in the rose garden in the
Wow,
backyard of that house, and I keep it framed, at home, and, I just look at it like,
wow.
as inspiration and whatnot.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So a couple different things, even from what you shared. What was your great aunt's name? And with it, did you even know like was she taught this like from I guess like her mother, or was it one of those things she picked up these skills? Or
I
you don't
think
know?
it's one of those things that, like, sadly, like, my grandmother and all her siblings, there were
Mm,
8 of them, they all passed,
mm, mm,
but all the women could sew, so
mhm,
I'm going to assume that, their mother, my great-grandmother, taught them that at
mm,
some point. A lot of women in that generation could sew, but they were, like, actually creating it's one thing to kinda, like, go with a
mhm.
pattern and whatnot, but,
Yeah.
they had the knowledge of, like, fabrics and silks and what fibers and
Mm,
whatnot to use, and they were, like, creating
mm,
creations, right? And so my great aunt's name was Joyce Lewis.
mm.
Birth name Joyce Allison. She married a prominent math educator at Detroit Public Schools named Samuel Lewis. He was always, getting profiled because he was a leader, an educator, and mentor, and all of that. They had 2 daughters. Sean became a journalist
Mm,
and worked at the Detroit News, and she just retired from the
mm.
Detroit News. So I'm growing up with like, my mother was a journalist, my cousins were journalists, so I'm indoctrinated to be
To
one,
all
right?
these
Just
writers.
growing up around them,
Mhm,
but like, my great aunt Joyce, she that was her living. I mean,
mm.
she was married to a teacher, yes, but she sustained herself by, custom making dresses,
Wow.
for, all of these society women and when entirely black clientele. And
Mm,
I'll never forget the story that my grandmother used to say. My grandmother was a nursing student. She became a nurse. But anytime Aunt Joyce needed some models, she called all the sisters, like, I need y'all to come out, right?
mhm.
And so they had booked Lou Rawls,
Wow.
to perform, and Lou Rawls was not Lou Rawls yet. He was still, trying to make a name for
Was he
himself.
Tobacco Road Lou Rawls by that time, or you don't know?
Somewhere around there,
It
somewhere
was
around
before
there.
You'll Never Find.
And,
Mhm.
my grandmother and my grandfather, they were dating at the time. They weren't
Okay,
they weren't married yet.
okay.
There was, like, a dressing room,
Mm,
right? And, the women needed the dressing room to change
mhm.
into the clothes and stuff, and my grandmother sees this man, in the dressing room, and she's like, "Get get what you doing here?
So
Get out of the
the
dressing
first
room, 'cause
exchange with your grandfather could have went left already.
Yeah,
We wouldn't even have Aaron here.
and so, they walk the runway or,
Uh-huh.
the makeshift runway and then sit in the audience and then like, now we've got this performer straight out of Chicago, Lou Rawls, and my
Uh-huh.
grandmother like clutches onto my grandfather's arm. She's like, I just kicked that man out of my dressing room.
Oh, Lou Rawls was the guy. Okay, all right, hilarious.
Yeah. So, and so, for years she would, anytime a Lou Rawls record came on, she'd be like, yeah, I kicked him out my dressing
Hilarious.
room.
Hilarious. So you never saw a United Negro College Fund special growing up where
You
it's like
couldn't watch it without her telling that story, like, "I kicked that man out my."
Hilarious, hilarious. All right, so with that, you gave a little bit of Conant Gardens.
Yeah.
North End is another one of those communities as well. That definitely connect. Did your family keep the house over there? Do you remember going there as a child?
They did not. The house
Okay.
that they lived in over there is under the freeway right now.
Wow.
And so
Okay.
I gotta share this story. So like my grandmother grew up in Conant Gardens, went to Pershing.
Mhm.
My grandfather grew up in North End and went to Northern.
Mhm.
Half of the Four Tops went to, two of them, I forget which ones, but two of the Four Tops went to Northern.
Mhm.
Two of them went to Pershing. And they were the two that went to Pershing were in there the same time as my grandmother, and the two that went to Northern were in the same
Okay.
time that my grandfather was there. My grandfather was a hall monitor at Northern High School.
Okay.
He, God bless his soul. Like I admire the man. He's a giant in our family, but he was a nerd back in the day.
Hilarious.
He founded the National Honor Society.
Okay.
At Northern.
Hey, now that actually is historic when we think of Northern High School because the legacy even before.
Yeah.
That's big.
But he was a hall monitor and he was a snitch, right?
Okay.
And so,
Hey.
and there would be these two dudes that would be cutting class and singing doo-wop in the hallways. And my grandfather, the hall monitor, like be like, truant, we're gonna get back to algebra or whatever. And those two dudes were eventually joined the Four Tops.
Okay.
And they linked up with like I said, the other two were with my grandmother over on the east side. And so, but the North End was, that was, let's say that was the starting point. So like the house that they lived in, I grew up hearing stories because, they moved out as soon as they could because they said it was just so cramped. And so, my grandmother sort of grew up comfortable.
Yeah.
In a house over, we've seen Conant Gardens, a lot of houses and whatnot. They were in like a flat and, they talked about like my grandfather used to talk about this dude who my great grandmother always described him as this boy who was always smiling because he was always showing his teeth. And my great grandmother used to just fondly remember this boy in the North End who was always showing his teeth. He was so happy. He was so smiling. And my grandfather had to remind her, no, he was always smiling because he got his upper lip cut off in a knife fight on like Holbrook or something like that. But I mean, the North End, my grandfather always talked about like how he allegedly knew that Smokey Robinson used to be out in these streets. Like before he picked up that pen and sat down on that piano, he used to be out in these streets like, robbing folks.
Well, definitely when we think of Motown records, people know my Northwestern high school history, but a lot of the players from Motown definitely came from Northwestern, but many of the performers and singers are Northern, or at least started at Northern. And I mean, even the Smokey starts, but I mean, even the classic, Going to a Go-Go record, which is like, I guess like a strip club anthem of its day. You know what I'm saying?
What was that? The 20 grand?
That was, it was like, it was
one of those.
Tip Drill in 1960 something.
I mean, there's that story about like Aretha and Smokey. I think they're on Soul Train or something like that. And Don Cornelius is like, so you two lived on the same block? And they were like, yeah, that's just how it was. Like, it was a bunch of talent.
Definitely, like in that community, definitely Aretha, more prominence, especially, C.O. Franklin coming here to lead the church and everything. But a lot of other families, Northern is definitely not close to even the old Northwestern per se, but the neighborhood's kind of intermingled. Even though the North End, I guess, is technically on the east side, it's so borderline. Yeah. It gets a lot of different cultures, and like Highland Park is right there. So it's a lot. It's always been a lot of culture over there, even to this day.
Yep.
Even to this day, it's been rich over there. So where did they move from there?
Let's see. My great grandmother, she had 3 kids. My grandfather was the oldest, and then there was a little bit of age gap between her next two daughters, my great aunts, and my grandfather went off, married my grandmother, started their life, and they moved, they went from like an apartment in Highland Park, and
Mm.
as his career kept going, they kept moving
Kept moving.
further west on
Okay.
94. So they
I
went,
got you.
you know, they went
You say
they
further
went
west on
they
94.
went to
They start
Inks
at the north end.
and they bought like a brand new house in
Uh-huh.
Inkster in a
Okay.
in a subdivision in Inkster,
Okay.
and like this is when Inkster was like, you know, like like Brady. I look at the way the neighborhood is laid
Mhm.
out. It's just like, oh, this is kind of like the
Yeah.
Brady Bunch, right? Except it's
Mhm.
Inkster, right? But and they ended up in Ypsilanti.
Okay.
But my great grandmother moved to housing project on Charles Street,
Mhm.
like we call it Bangladesh now,
Mhm.
right north of Hamtramck, and
Yeah.
then one of my aunts went to Pershing.
Okay.
The other one went to Cass, and she
Okay.
was in like the equivalent of the IB High Honors
Hmm.
class at the time. Then my great grandmother moved to It Was New. She eventually moved and lived the rest of her days in Sheridan Place
Hmm.
on the senior buildings on Jefferson.
Okay.
And when those were built, she got one of the first apartments
Wow.
there. So yeah, so they went over there. It's funny because the area at that time on Charles Street, we're talking like Conant,
Mhm.
Joseph Campbell and stuff like that.
Mhm.
My mother used to, as a little girl, go spend the summers with my great grandmother over
Mm.
there, and she only knew that area as like a strictly black neighborhood. And
Mhm.
so I took her on a drive through there
Yeah.
recently, and now it's become, it's beautiful. It's become Banglatown, but for anybody that has not been over there a while, it does kind of blow your mind, like just how culturally different it is
Mhm.
now over there. And she couldn't believe it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean that area has its own set of history, but I personally think it's fascinating to see just like how a completely new community and culture has made its way over there.
Oh, most definitely. We were talking Hamtramck in another recent interview. Shout out to Bill Meyer, that's been there for years as well. Most diverse place in America itself. Like, I mean, as I always say, it's only one place in America where you probably could get, a Polish pastry, some Bengali chicken, and then get some Lebanese sauce, and then get some Southern sweet potato pie, all within like walking distance, like literal walking distance. You know what I'm saying? And that is Hamtramck. All right. So with this all, you definitely mentioned your mom is a writer too.
Yeah.
And clearly you connect to that. As a child growing up, were books always around? Were you guys one of those encyclopedia families? What
Hmm.
was the where was I guess you, literature, writing, reading, where was that at?
First of all, my mother could uh put any Detroit Public Library branch to shame. Like she's
Wow. Wow.
I was fortunate that she grew up idolizing a lot of
Mhm.
like the Toni Morrisons,
Mm,
Alice Walkers, and so
mm,
there were a lot of, especially a
okay.
lot of black female literature. Gail Jones, I believe her
Mhm.
name is. She wrote Eva's Man
Uh-huh.
and some books like that. But yeah, I mean, there was never not a time where it's just like I'm not surrounded by books
Wow.
and literature and magazines just like
Mm,
that. We subscribe to Jet, Ebony, and Essence.
okay.
Um,
Johnson Publications
yes.
holding it down.
And how my mother became a writer. Her father, my grandfather, and her mother, my grandmother. My grandmother was a nurse. My grandfather was also a nurse, but he went on to get his PhD
Mhm.
in a medical field. And so they were in the medical field, and they wanted my mother to also go
Be in the medical field.
be somehow uh
Mhm.
in a medical field. And when she was in high school, she worked at like a nursing home, and
Mm,
nursing homes back then were not, not nearly as modern as they are now. But she had all these horror stories about
mm,
turning over somebody to do their bedpan or something like that, and it'd be like roaches underneath,
mm,
eating at people's skin and stuff like that. And so she, don't like the sight of blood,
mhm.
can't barely stand, see people like throw up and stuff like that. And she's like, I don't want to go in the medical field. I want to
That
become a
that
writer.
that probably was a good choice because
Yeah,
yeah, you definitely have to have a good stomach, as they say, for
yeah.
some of that caretaking, and God bless those that do.
Yeah, and so she went to U of M,
Mm.
and, first job out of college was working at the Michigan Chronicle,
Wow.
and so, now,
What era is this?
um there's a couple of detours in the story. My mother started college in '79.
Okay.
And let's just say she linked back up with an old boyfriend, my father.
Okay. There you go.
That he was joining, after he finished high school, he was joining the army, and my mother needed money to keep paying her tuition at U of M.
Yeah.
And my dad was just like, well, this GI Bill, like,
Yeah.
like come get this army money. And so
Okay.
they eloped,
Okay.
joined the army together, got stationed in Germany,
Wow.
had me in Germany,
Wow.
and then realized that maybe we were moving a little bit too fast, because they went from like single to parents and like
Yeah.
in this whole army thing, living overseas in like 2 to 3 years.
Wow.
They divorced and when I was very young. They finalized it when I was like 2, and I've only known
Them not together.
them not together. So it's not
Okay.
like, oh, childhood divorce, so tragic. But my mother went back. She did
Complete.
finish her degree, and then so by the time she got her job at the Chronicle, I was, this was '88, so
Okay.
I was 4, and so my earliest memories of my mother at work were right over here on Ledyard, in the Chronicle newsroom.
Okay.
Being that she was a single mom, sometimes if she, if I, my grandmother would babysit or something like that, but sometimes she like take off, go pick me up from school, bring me back to the Chronicle, and I'm watching this newspaper come to life. She was there from '88 to '96.
Wow.
And so I spent a lot of days there, with some of the great writers, Steve Holsey, Marie Teasley, a lot of the people who have names now. Ken Coleman was there, Greg Dunmore was there. And yeah, it's, in my mind, in my young mind, I saw a newspaper being put out, and at that time, there was no higher regard than like having your name in the newspaper. And here's my mother's; her name is in the newspaper multiple times every time it comes out, because she works here, right? And so I didn't understand, the concept of a black newspaper when I was younger. And I always tell people, like, growing up in Detroit, period, you don't know that you live in a black city until you leave.
You got that right. You got that right.
I got to East Lansing. I went to Michigan State and got to East Lansing, and I was reminded exactly who I was, because I was like, oh my gosh. But the same kind of concept to me came, with my mother working at a black newspaper. Like all the staff is black. All of the issues are black, and all of that. But now that I'm older, I realize, papers like the Chronicle and the Chicago Defender and so on and so forth were very important in documenting our stories, because, the mainstream papers were not doing it.
Yeah,
So,
and even the lens in which they see it.
yeah.
So now I guess I can give a little bit of context to this. So a lot of people that definitely know, the association of a lot of these black newspapers at a time, especially we're talking like late '80s through like the mid '90s. This is still a time when I think journalism itself was. I often share this, like, one of the first assignments I have in first grade, which kind of in that window, what's that, like 89, 88, read an article, who, what, when, where, why, and, one of those early assignments. And I always say, now I think you can be a brilliant person, and I give you that same article, and it's hard probably to decipher more than 2 of those things sometimes, because just the way that social media and the way we deliver media itself and content, now we even call it content, it delivers differently. So a lot of those early articles, you even said even about Conant Gardens, the just documenting what this is, and the Michigan Chronicle, an anchor in this world. And during that time, you're looking at also like the ownership and leadership of Sam Logan. And Sam Logan's personality, rest in peace. He was definitely somebody that if you meet him and you do have an exchange with him, you're gonna remember it.
If you know, you know.
And even like his vision, sometimes sometimes, I mean, this is just in, from my perspective and seeing others, being open to like continue press, not just everything that seems in the wave of where people are going, but a lot is covered in that same arc. And the Michigan Chronicle, as you said, yeah, Steve Holsey, like people like built institutions around this, and what would connect, and how you study the arc of a lot of these stories, because even if it's the same story, like the way that a chronicle is going to deliver versus a free press. And even though, free press has some, hell of a black writers there too, but just even the lens of something, you can get into like the nuances of like, I remember, all the coverage of like the Million Man March. Did the free press cover it? Most definitely. But the arc of it is just completely different, in which how you see it and where it comes from and how it shows up, and even like the cultural dynamics of it. Like, I would be shocked to see if, you know what I'm saying, in a year, the Detroit News or the Free Press just like announcing like, yo, this is this pastor's 75th birthday and this anniversary of what's happening at this church. You gonna get that in the Chronicle.
Yeah. I was literally just saying the other day, I was saying it this morning too. The Sheffield family history lies in the Chronicle archives, because they were relentlessly, Horace Sheffield, the Mayor Sheffield's grandfather, right? I can't remember, fourth, third, it's so many of them, but he had a column in the Michigan Chronicle, and he's talking in his column. I had lunch with Dr. Martin Luther King today, and he's a very brilliant young freedom fighter and stuff like that. And there's that. Let's go to Steve Holsey for a minute. Who, every black artist that ever come out of Detroit, Steve Holsey was very likely, I'll say it's safe to say he was the first to write about him, right? During my mother's time there, she has a ton of pictures with all of the black celebrities that, like, if you did a stage play in Detroit, if you, if you had something to promote, because remember back in the day, like, a new artist, you trying to break a new artist, they had to like go to all the radio stations, travel to all the radio stations. If you had a new sitcom, if you had a new TV show to promote, if you had a new movie, that it would do premieres in like the major black markets, and Detroit was one of them. And so because it was such a strong entertainment output at the Chronicle, my mother's got photo. I posted a TikTok collage of just some of the photos my mother is taking with all the celebrities that went to the Chronicle newsroom, did their interviews there. We're not talking like, oh, I got to go through a publicist and we're gonna do a Zoom and get on every fight. No, like the black paper was so strong that you had to stop by to say hello to your people, right? And so my mom's got pictures with Cheryl Lee Ralph, all of these folks that we like. Oh, Barbara from Abbott Elementary? No, like I think she was promoting like to sleep with no, before that. Like the Mighty Quinn or something like that. That's how far we were talking. Like pictures with Tisha Campbell when she went on a press tour for a house party. Because a lot of those black movies back in the day, they didn't get all the mainstream advertising, but you knew you had that audience with the black press. Phyllis Hyman came to the newsroom, Angela Bofill, Hugh Masekela came to the newsroom. She doesn't have a one-on-one with him, but remember when Nelson Mandela came to Detroit? Definitely. She was part of the, few journalists that, was allowed access to Mandela, right? And and she has tons of stories like that. She's I like to give a little asterisk, like may or may not be true, but you have to verify. But my mother always says she's the first person to write an in-depth feature about Kim Worthy, like recognizing that this black female attorney is about to do some big things, and she was leading the Malice Green case at the time. And so, the Chronicle gave, if you look through the archives, the Chronicle, was giving, recognizing who was going to be up next, right? I was telling somebody yesterday, like, Berry Gordy's family was a prominent black family before Berry Gordy
Very
started
much so.
Motown. But there's so many little tidbits about like young songwriter Berry Gordy gets a hit record with Jackie
Jackie
Wilson,
Wilson.
and then you see like a little 3 sentence paragraph in a gossip column that Berry Gordy, rising songwriter, has just purchased a house on West Grand Boulevard. What's
Mhm.
he gonna do with it?
Yep.
And so, you know, and the Chronicle was there, right?
Yeah.
You keep going through the years, and all of a sudden, it's just like, the Supremes are in Japan and they're
Mhm.
challenging the Beatles. It's like, but you go back a few years, it's like, oh, he just bought a house on West Grand Boulevard.
Yeah.
Oh, good for you.
Yep.
So, I love that. I love that I was a witness to that sort of history. And I love the fact that like, I've part of, part of the reason I'm back in Detroit, after being in New York for a couple of years is I'm working at the Chronicle now. And
Yeah.
so continuing that legacy, picking up that torch is, I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it,
Mhm.
but man, it's full circle. So
Okay. Okay. Definitely. I love what you shared, and even just the way that you delivered the context of a lot of that. That's impactful. That's definitely impactful. And now I guess I gotta, the classic Detroit is different, like kind of in that bouncing. What was it? What was it? Do you think that stood out in writing and journalism to your mother? What was she more so looking to express? What was she connecting with, and where did her arc in writing end up taking after the Chronicle?
um, my mother's a Pisces. And
Mhm.
Pisces are emotional. And
Mhm.
so you have to have some, like, every Pisces I know has some kind of outlet, right?
Mm.
And so I think writing was hers.
Okay.
She was really good, like at English
Mm.
and anything to do with like literature and
Mm.
English and writing, like she really gravitated toward that. When she got hired at the Chronicle, I think she was a religion writer and like
Mm.
writing obituaries and stuff like that. You got to start off like
Yeah.
but she also had the opportunity to. I mean, one thing about the Chronicle is like a lot of Black women journalists came through there, right? And writing specifically about issues that matter to Black women, and so my mother being like a younger generation hired there, she was writing about some of the
Mhm.
things that spoke to her generation
Mm.
at the time. One of my favorite pieces that she's written, you remember the song "Thanks for My Child" by
Yeah.
Cheryl Husky Riley.
Yes.
Um, you know, I love this story. The song blew up, but it blew up on WJLB like big time. And back in the day, you had to call to request a song, right? And they would play your request on the air. My mother noticed that like a lot of single moms were calling into WJLB begging to hear this record,
Mm.
right? And so she's writing this lead. She's just like, people are calling WJLB in tears
Wow.
because this record about being a single mother is like touching everybody, right?
Mhm.
And she spoke to like the program managers and stuff like that, and spoke to
Mm.
other, single moms who resonated with the song. It's those little like cultural, like
Mhm.
well, documentation and stuff like that, that's where she really shines. And
Wow.
so,
Okay.
um, you know, no shade, like I can't imagine a free press telling
I
that story,
mean,
right?
and
What I'm
yeah, the
saying?
the lens in which this kind of goes back to the cultural competency. It's like the lens in which that will be delivered sometimes it just won't be seen. And I know when I've been in rooms like this, definitely when I was younger, and I'm
Yeah,
sure in the future too, where you're like, hey, this is happening, so you need to be here connected to this. And then they're like, I don't get it. Why? Because culturally, different things connect. Even with like the message in a song like that. And it's so funny you even mentioned that. I was watching some of the unsung
yeah,
about her. Um, a minute ago, but even the way that the unsung documentary is told is so different than like a like behind the music
right,
documentary
right.
of like where it is like where you learn like where this person lived, how they grew up, what their roots were. Whereas behind the music, which I'm not saying that's a bad one, it always is like they sold this many records with this and that. It's like really way more almost less interpersonal.
Mhm.
But the interpersonal has such a strong connection to even how we even connect with something. It's like, who are you before we even can get to like what's going on here? You know, another classic record like that, I think that speaks the same way was Tupac Shakur, Brenda's Got a Baby, and
Mhm.
Jimmy Iovine and his other partner at Interscope are like, we don't understand this record. Why would this even be something people would care about?
Yeah.
You know, so it's definitely those moments. So it's that's deep that your mother like really grabbed on and like kind of knew how to have those points of communication in what she was writing and everything to make those touch points and everything.
Yeah. After the Chronicle, my mother went into communications and
Mm.
public relations,
Mhm.
as a lot of folks do, right?
Mhm.
And she actually returned back and forth. Like she,
Mhm.
went back to journalism for a while. For a time she was working at Eastern Michigan University and their communications department. She's largely retired now.
Okay.
But every once in a while,
A passion project comes where it's like, I'm gonna do this.
yeah, I you
Mhm.
know I edited an anthology about Detroit neighborhoods,
Mm.
that came out in 2017,
Hmm.
and I was like, "Mom, can you write me an essay?"
Hilarious.
Can-
Hilarious.
anytime something comes up, she's on it. So
That's deep. And it also, like, I mean, communications can be the same way and public relations because so many things, back to like it's culture, how you connect,
yeah,
where things go, Lord knows. And in today's world, man, if you're not like right on point with where you stand with things,
hmm
as some of our more I don't know, what do I want to say, more prominent artists in our community seem to have not necessarily stewarded their relationship with our community the way that it connects. And now it's like you go from like to it's a lot of discussions that need to start before we start doing business again, you know? So with that, even in your story, in so you're seeing all this writing, definitely through your mother and all of this. When does it hit you that this is something that I want to do?
So, I had toys growing
Mhm.
up. I used to love playing with
Mm.
Matchbox cars and
Okay.
Hot Wheels, but my mother thought it was a good idea to give me a typewriter
Okay.
when I was like 6
That's
or 7.
okay. That's
Like
old
she
school. I'm with it.
she had one like this portable one that she
Okay.
used in college, and
Okay.
she gave it to me to keep me busy, right?
Okay.
But I had as a kid, I had a wild imagination, and I was exposed to a lot of things that kids really shouldn't,
Mm.
not inappropriate things, but um, I was one of the many kids who sat out with their grandmother and watched like The Young and the Restless
Yeah.
in Bold and Beautiful and
Mhm.
in the soaps and stuff like that. That's all storytelling, right?
Mhm.
It's all world building
Yeah.
and character plot twist and stuff like that. So, a very young age, I'm watching this drama
Mhm.
play out. I loved, like anything having to do with like treasure hunts and stuff
Mm.
like that. So where in the world is Carmen Sandiego?
Oh
I
man.
I loved
Okay.
that. So I loved adventure. I
Right.
loved that sort of thing. I
Mhm.
also really, I had like a weird obsession with like Detroit street names and
Hmm.
Detroit neighborhoods when I
Okay.
was little. Because growing up, we had family all over the city.
Mhm.
And so I would be kind of like, I'm riding back seat. If we're going up Woodward, I'm counting like Euclid,
Wow.
Holbrook, Philadelphia. I'm like memorizing all the street names.
Mhm.
We go over here, Indian Village, Iroquois, Seminole,
Mhm.
Burns. We go over here, you going down 7 Mile.
Yep.
And it gets real British all of a sudden because it's like
Mm.
Lincolnshire and
Yeah.
once you hit Palmer Woods and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And back in the day we did not have GPS. We had map atlases and map books and stuff like that. And my mom would like ask me occasionally like look up the address to
Something.
something, and
Mhm.
I'd just be flipping through that
Right.
map book and memorizing all the
Mm.
streets and stuff like that.
Wow.
And so I combined all of that into, I'm on my little typewriter,
Mhm.
and as an adult, I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, I mean, this is a little obsessive," but I'm looking at stories I'm writing, and I'm writing about, like, little fun little short fiction stories. My
Mhm.
classmates in elementary school are the main characters, but I imagine them as
Mm.
adults, and I'm just like, "So and so is living in a big Indian village
Mhm.
house on Seminole, and
Okay.
then she gets on a pirate ship and goes and
Mhm.
finds some buried treasure." I just was writing a lot of little short stories.
Wow.
There was a part of me, it's just like, "Well, this is what my mother does, so thus I must do it too." But as I got older, like I too started gravitating more towards like the English classes and
Mm.
stuff like that. I really love to read.
Hmm.
I went to Chrysler Elementary on the east side, and I have to thank all of my teachers who recognized that
Mm.
there was some
Some
kind of
talent. Mhm.
there. And then we had a student newspaper and
Mm.
stuff like that. They were always telling me like, "What you gonna write this month? What you
Wow.
gonna write this month?" I did well with like the little book reports and
Okay.
essays and stuff like that. And I was like, I really like writing.
Mm.
Um, but then you get to a point where it's just like you get older, it's just like, well, do I like fiction writing and
Mm.
literature or do I like journalism?
Mm.
Like one is based in,
Mhm.
fiction has elements of truth to it, and journalism is the truth, right? And so
Supposed to be.
yeah, and so, I get to Renaissance for high school.
Mm.
What's your elective gonna be freshman year? Journalism.
Wow.
So because you have to take journalism to either get into newspaper or yearbook, and so I already had it mapped out. I was
Yeah.
just like, we doing journalism ninth grade, and
Mm.
then I'm gonna be on the newspaper,
Mm.
10th till graduation, and that's exactly what happened.
Okay.
Um, I real you know, at that point, I was realizing, like, I'm not just trying to be like my mother. I genuinely
Mhm.
enjoy this craft. I genuinely enjoy, like, I feel like I have a talent here, and I'm going to, do my thing to pursue it as much as I can. But remember how I mentioned that my grandfather and my grandmother were in the medical field and
Mhm.
nurses and stuff
Yeah.
like that, and they
The
tried.
same thing. Yeah, they were
They
like
they
they was like, "Hey, we ain't get her,
yeah.
but we gonna get the
Yeah.
grandson."
Yeah, so they're looking at me and my little brother like,
Yeah.
um,
Doctor and doctor. Yes.
like, it's either gonna be doctor and doctor, engineer and doctor, or something.
Yep.
But, we gotta have another, like,
Yeah.
white coat or something in
Mhm.
this family,
Yeah.
and my grandfather,
Mhm.
he went to Wayne, for undergrad, but he got his master's and his,
Doctorate.
doctorate from the University of Michigan,
Okay.
and he had season tickets to see the Wolverines every
Okay.
football season, and,
Okay.
every Christmas, I get, like, a Michigan sweatshirt and stuff like that, so you
Okay.
look at pictures of me from, like, age 0 to, 16 or so,
You was always a
I was,
Wolverine.
but U of M Ann Arbor does not have a journalism program.
Mm.
My mother went there and she got a communications degree.
Yeah.
And they don't have that anymore.
Mm.
But I was like, well, if I'm going to be a journalist, I need to get a degree in journalism. You
Mm.
know who does have a journalism program, a very good one, is Michigan State.
Oh,
So
man.
guess who was super disappointed
Oh,
and,
man.
borderline ready to excommunicate me from the family when I announced at a Christmas dinner that,
You were taking your talents to East Lansing.
I'm taking my talents to East Lansing,
He
and
was like, "Oh my god."
my Wolverine grandfather was
Ah,
livid. Oh my
hilarious.
gosh.
Hilarious.
But yeah, and my mother went to U of M, so I was not only was I like, interrupting the legacy, like you got the nerve to go to Michigan State,
Hey.
and
W
but they had what I wanted.
Yeah.
They Michigan State has a summer journalism program where you live on campus for a year if you're in high school for high school journalists. And I did that 2 years in a row. And I was
Wow.
like, this is kind of fly. I live,
Mhm.
at 16, I was just like,
Yeah.
living on campus, this is fun.
Mhm.
And yeah, I really just gravitated and fell in love with going to Michigan State. And so
Okay.
that's worked at the student newspaper there, did the internships, got the degree, you know, jobs after that was just just
So
the thing, so
so I wanna uplift a couple things that you already touched on. First, you talked about playing with toys, and
yeah.
me too. It's like it's a gateway to imagination, So like you're whatever. It's like this is G.I. Joe and this is Michelangelo, the Ninja Turtle, and they're like not always like fighting, but you like build plots and stuff. Like I remember, you get a cardboard box and it's like, okay, this is the Technodrome or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But it gets your imagination
Yep.
running. So you start like transferring some of this vivid imagination
Mhm.
into some of the writing itself, which definitely I don't sometimes look at it like, I know schools do, but it's a whole business to it. But like, it's like, you got to pick. You're either going to be this writer or that
Yeah,
writer.
yeah.
I think that it's all kind of interconnected in reality. Even in the truth that we need, we still need a packaging of how you tell the arc of a story.
Mhm.
Because, if not, like, I don't know if you all have ever read the legal document of like a crime, like a criminal report. It's
Mhm.
like, everything you read is there, but it's almost like you wouldn't even have any like personal connection to what it is. So I'm definitely, rest in peace, Stephanie Good, but a lot of the packaging of that is definitely how that story's being told and how, because if you take all of those elements out, you're just looking at it like, oh, this is an incident between security and a person not doing what security requested them to do. And you can make it flat like that, but the story itself is like, I think really where, it almost gives humanity to whatever you're saying.
What I love most about what I do is it's something that sort of inherently comes sooner or later, but I I love, trying to read between the lines and piece together a story
Mhm.
based off of like kind of like with a crime report. Like, how do we piece together a story of what's really happening with
Mhm.
just the evidence in front of us?
Mhm.
And so, the example I'll give is I've been going, since I've been at the Chronicle, but back at the Chronicles,
Yeah.
but like I've just been going through the archives, just punching in a
Mhm.
different keyword and
Wow.
seeing what comes up.
Mhm.
Um and uh Dietrich Furs is going out of business. And so I decided, I typed in like fur coats in the
Yeah.
Michigan Chronicle archives and stuff like that. And there's a very early mention of a furrier owned by a white family who started hiring Negro clerks, right? And in my mind, I'm just like, why, why would the Chronicle write this, right? Why they were writing about these like good white people hiring these black people to sell fur coats? Well, let's think about what's going on at the time.
Yeah.
We have more black people coming to Detroit. We have
Mhm.
this middle class growing. And when, black people start shopping downtown and where all the retail is,
Yeah.
um, eh, a lot of the white merchants are figuring out, well, if we want to get this clientele, if we want to,
Yeah.
get their business, we need to start,
Yeah.
hiring folks that look like them, right?
Mhm.
And so, that's what's not, that part is unsaid in that
Mhm.
particular story. But I'm like I said, I'm looking at like what else, what else is going on? Why is the Michigan Chronicle like so deep in Conant Gardens and
Yeah.
writing every single little thing that's going on there? Because it was such a hard fought battle for
Definitely.
black people to even live there, right?
Certainly.
And so we're gonna like talk about everybody thing. And
Mhm.
back in the day, Chronicle used to print addresses of not like uh put people on blast, but
Yeah.
like if they like so and so had a tea party in her rose garden on
Yeah.
5200 Conant, right?
But
Right.
to just what you were saying,
Yeah.
two of my more recent interviews this past I usually record on Sundays and Tuesdays, if anybody knows, but this past Sunday, two interviews that connect right to both points you're speaking of. Bill Meyer, he's Canadian but a white man that his family moves to Detroit. And in the 50s, he vividly remembers the neighborhood, like and this is for sure a black neighborhood now, but like right around Cooley, like in the Schaefer, like Hubble neighborhood, everybody he remembers all the kids are like, oh, you gotta come out. It's like this big disturbance. You can't believe this, we can't believe this, we can't believe this. So he's young enough, I think he said he's 11 at the time. He rides his bike over to this house. what's happening is a black family is moving into this neighborhood
Mhm.
off Schaefer. And all of the neighbors, which he said, because Canada, just things are different. He didn't really identify with this, but the racial slurs, like throwing things. And he was like, damn, that stuck with me at 11. So that's one story in like the arc of what you're saying. And the other one is Arthur Chapman and the Chapman family that has the jeweler and how that grew, which is already a heck of a story. But he has a great uncle that happened to be the first black salesperson at the Hudsons.
Mhm.
But it took a long time because he had a darker skin tone, and usually like we're getting into like the paper bag test, and these are things that black folks knew back then, but it's not like, going to be incepted. So this carries on. So he starts as a basement elevator guy.
Mm.
Operator. Then he moves into the main elevator operator, and then he's trustworthy enough to eventually become the salesman. These are stories because this is like the arc of like a lot of how black folks are getting access to, for lack of a better term, I'm going to say, uh, I don't want to say institutions. Let me say, I want to say aspects of America that definitely were rejecting our people up to that point.
Mhm.
And the Chronicle and many other papers really tell a lot of these stories. And, it's one of those things that really speaks to something that can go because, as you saw, it's like, yeah, when you move into that neighborhood, it's going to be, people, racial slurs and people throwing things at it. So at least if I have this paper, if I have this, this newspaper, this article for the Chronicle, it's in the back of other folks' mind that, okay, we over there and, we need to kind of represent because you all should know the Sweeney House story and everything that happened with that. And shout out to Daniel Baxter for carrying on the tradition of that. But that was prevalent and happening not just in Detroit, but just in America at a time where, we weren't given access. And I'm not necessarily saying that it's all access is granted and given right now either, but it means something.
I gotta share this because, I think about like influencers and stuff like that, and we in 2026 we've obviously reached a place where like somebody with like 1 million TikTok followers uh, says go eat here at this place, that's how we communicate amongst each other now. But like back in the 1930s we didn't have it. I think we can retroactively say that this concept existed back then, because when I was looking up stories about like fur coats and stuff like that, I found this story. There was a different furrier. And side note, there were a lot of fur. Dietrich was probably the last.
Yeah.
Of there were a lot of furriers back in the day that like just don't exist
Okay,
anymore.
nerd Detroit moment I'm gonna give people. So before being known as the car capital of the world, Detroit was most known, and this
trade.
more as a French province. So this goes back to Detroit being a province of France. Cadillac, that's a French name and all of that. And I mean, still talking colonization. It's just, what side of the map we talking, you know what I'm saying? But what they were doing was a lot of the furs.
Yeah.
So I just want to uplift that for folks.
Absolutely. And like, there was this one company who asked if they could, they gifted a fur coat to Joe Louis.
Wow.
And Joe, back in the, we didn't have a whole lot of celebrities, but Joe Louis was
Brown Bomber.
the celebrity, right?
Yes.
Because they knew if Joe Louis was walking around with, wearing this fur coat from whatever retailer it was, what are they gonna do? Folks going, where you get that from?
Exactly.
Oh, come on down. And it wasn't like he was wearing like it wasn't like the name of the store was like printed on his back or something like that. They were just like, this is a gift for the Brown Bomber.
There you go.
And that's how they built their business. But like we can in that regard we can say that that's like what the influencer concept is now. That reminded me of another story of how Pelly Pelly, the brand,
the customized leathers.
Yeah, they like the trademark was sold right?
Mm.
And there was I I wrote a story about it. I
Mm.
wrote it for Black Magazine.
Mhm.
And so, and I think I found out about it because, one of the larger retailers of Peli Peli was, like, in Chicago,
Yes.
and they were saying something like, end of an era or something like that.
Uh-huh.
Um, First, trying to track down Mark Buchanan, was a journey. Like,
I was gonna say, yeah, that's gonna be
he's very reclusive, but,
mhm.
I found out during some research and stuff like that, like, how Peli Peli, like, became a brand. A lot of people don't know it's a Detroit brand, right?
Mhm.
A lot of people think it's a New York brand. No, the New
Mhm.
Yorkers got it from,
Mhm.
us, right? But, how Peli Peli was able to kind of, like, get that boost and really take off was they got Tommy Hearns,
Yeah, I was gonna what's
to
so funny, I was
yeah,
just
yeah.
about to jump on that because,
Yeah,
that's another East Pole
yeah,
town,
yeah.
a different historic type neighborhood for the
Yep,
Black community, but we love
yeah.
that too, but the Hitman.
Yeah, so the lesson is,
Yep.
if you trying to get a brand to pop off, you gotta go to the boxing ring, right?
Yep.
Like, what's Clarissa Shields like? Who's her
I
her
have no
sponsor?
idea, but here's another classic one that I think that I wanna actually do a whole we may talk about that. I wanna do, like, a whole piece on the Renaissance Center as it transitions, but
Mhm.
one of the first big events there was a Tommy Hearns fight.
Mm. I didn't know that.
As like a big like kickoff of like getting people here because just time changes and
Mhm.
everything. So with that, Michigan State, you're there, you're writing in journalism, and this I love the richness of it. What's the thought process and what era Michigan State? Let me ask that.
I was there from 2002 to, well, it was supposed to be 2006, but it's 2007.
Okay, so
Uh,
basically, you're there post Mateen Cleaves and
yes.
Flintstone era.
Yeah,
You're more like I guess
yeah.
that's like Mo
That
Ager and
yeah.
Charlie Bale and a lot of them other
Yep.
guys.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, Mateen Cleaves, he's legend status at
Mhm.
this point. I got there just as the couch burning era in the streets started, and so,
Okay.
I wanna say, like, 10th or 11th grade was, like, it was all over the news at the time. Look at all these crazy Michigan State kids burning couches in the
Hey,
middle of the street, and
hey.
and so that's what became, especially here in Detroit,
Mhm.
and especially going to Renaissance, we want our Renaissance cast and king kids. We want them to go to Harvard. We want to go to U of
Mhm.
M. We want them to go to Yale. What y'all doing? Go to a party school. That's all I heard when, I started voicing my intention to go to Michigan State. Oh, it's just a party school. You're just going to be burning couches.
Hilarious.
Well, I got there and I did witness things being burned in the streets
Mhm.
multiple times.
Yeah.
But that that was just part of the culture,
I would
but a very small part of the
I
culture,
was I would definitely say that, of the schools, in Michigan, I think of recruiting, Black students, especially from
Yep,
around here, I think Eastern Michigan and Michigan State
yep,
do the best for many reasons.
yep,
I've had clients that ask me this, that, like, do studies with this, and I'm
yep,
like, it's reasons for it. I mean, it's even said, like, you go to Cass, then you go to Michigan State, you go
yep,
to Renaissance, you go to U of M. Like, it's all these, like, different thought process and, like, just what's present there, but also, and Lord knows,
mhm,
I say this almost every Detroit is different. It's like every American institution definitely has a lot of roots in racism, so it
yep,
just supersedes wherever wherever we wanna
yep,
go with it, but, Michigan State, I think it does also have some unique histories that do tie back
yeah,
to a lot of the Black students that are there,
mhm,
and definitely for sure, like keeping it real, faking
yeah,
the funk, those things that go on. I don't know if it's still happening now, but there are parties there, but there are
yep,
also some real hardcore, especially when it comes to any form of academia in Black studies departments and Black
mhm,
history departments that go
yeah.
back to like
Farrell Dagbovie is like a legend. I don't know if you
yes,
yes, you like
yes.
I could he had a waiting list for his class, and I could not get
But I mean, but it's so many even that go back to I was up bringing this up the other day. I mean, Dr. Melvin Peters from Eastern Michigan University gets a
Mhm,
dissertation there as they're like one of the first universities that even have like a Africana and African
mm,
studies department and everything. Now, I'm definitely not waving the
mm,
Spartan flag or anything. I'm just giving you all some
yeah,
context to like the differences in the school, and also really I think right now, it feels different, but if you drive up there, you see it if you pay attention and stuff.
yeah,
But also Michigan State is it's an agricultural
yeah. It's a
institution.
cow college,
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
cow college, We
definitely.
got a we I was gonna say, yeah, we got a big ass like farm.
Many
We got
many of them.
cows on campus.
Many.
We have the dairy store.
Yes.
The farming students, or sorry, vet tech students, they milk the cows on campus,
Mhm.
and then the dairy is converted into ice cream, cheese, and you can buy it on campus. And
Yeah.
yeah, I
So it's that, but it also has, like, different dynamics of
yeah,
it. It's just how you
yeah,
go about your journey at state or wherever you choose to go, really. So with it, you're writing, you're
mhm,
there, and what's, like, the thought process as you get to '07 and thinking
yeah.
to yourself where you wanna go with writing and what's the plan?
So, you bring up an interesting topic that, like, I can't. I'm kicking myself for even neglecting to mention it.
Mhm.
I get to Michigan State in 2002.
Mhm.
2001 was the U of M affirmative action case
Mhm.
when that white woman sued
Yeah.
U of M for saying like, "Oh, I didn't get in because y'all
Yeah.
kept letting all these minorities
Yeah.
in."
Prop 2, definitely. That's a big
But
one.
what a lot of people don't realize was, the conversations from the U of M affirmative action case were reverberating to every, we no one tried to sue Michigan State, no one tried to sue like
Mhm.
Central Michigan,
Yeah.
but all of a sudden, I was one of two black people. All my friends lived in Hubbard and Acres and Brody Complex and stuff like that. I was one of two black people in Gilchrist Hall.
Wow. Mm.
And I got a lot of questions like, "So how did you get in?"
Wow.
Um, you
Wow,
know,
ain't that
and
something?
I was like, "I went to Renaissance, number 2 high school in state." Like,
Yeah.
that's how I got in, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, there was, I remember, I did not subscribe to this, but like, getting into these debates with white students
Mm.
on just having to prove my merit and
Yeah.
being like, "No, I didn't get in," not to say that affirmative action isn't needed, but, like, let's not assume that, like, one thing about Michigan State is, like, people look at the numbers. That, the population of Michigan State's, uh, uh campuses, black students like 6%, right?
Yeah.
But Michigan State has 42,000 students. So like at
Yeah.
any given time, about 6 to 7,000 black students are in one campus, which is more than some HBCUs. And I'm like, so you think they let all of us in on a on a technicality, right? But yeah, I mean, but back to the writing, how that translates to what I ended up writing about
Mm.
was, it wasn't just like this air of like, white people kind of like asking like, "How'd you get in?" Like,
Mhm.
How'd you get here?" Right? It's there were a lot of things happening at Michigan State and in greater East Lansing County at the time that made for some interesting challenges to be a black student, but also a black journalism student.
Mm.
Year prior to 2002, there were 4 black female students who were unfairly accosted and
Mm.
detained and suspected of shoplifting at Meridian Mall,
Mm.
and it was part of a long pattern of, similar incidents, but this one blew up, right?
Yeah.
There's always been like this don't go driving after dark down Okemos Road because they gonna get you, right?
Mhm.
All these types of things, just getting to Michigan State,
I
right?
mean, yeah,
You
even
gotta take
some of the
96
spots.
through
Yeah.
where? You gotta go through
Yeah.
how, and don't you stop. Don't stop for gas, don't get a flat
Yeah.
tire. So,
Yeah.
there's always these little air of fear and intimidation just because. So, we've got this shoplifting incident with 4 black students that, carries over into my freshman year,
Mm.
right? I was working at the student newspaper.
Mm.
God bless my fellow coworkers, but we did a lot of dumb stuff
Mm.
that was unintentionally racist, but I look back on it and was like, "Oh, we were so stupid." Um,
Mm.
we first of all, the state news where I work, we were always getting criticism for publishing mugshots of black suspects, and
Mhm.
we were like, but y'all don't print, there wasn't a balance of like printing white mugshots and stuff like that. We had that strike one. um I forget the football players, but we had two very standout football players who were like, they're gonna go pro, like, after this season or
Mhm.
whatever. And they were being, like, scouted by, some folks in the NFL, right? And so we took the team photos,
Mhm.
and we put it on the sports page. We took the team photos of these 2 players, right? And we created wanted posters, right?
Mm.
The goal was like, most wanted, like,
Yeah, like
because they're
going to the
most
NFL.
wanted by NFL. But
Yeah.
you know what black folks saw? They saw a
Yeah.
wanted poster with 2 black faces on it. They're like,
Yeah.
"What the hell y'all doing over at the State News?"
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
There was that.
Mm.
There was, we're good friends to this day.
Mhm.
But Michigan State had a very strong Black Student Alliance.
Mhm.
And every dorm had a chapter of the Black Student Alliance within
Mm.
the dorm, right?
Wow.
And back then, I don't know if you can do it now, but back then, if you were like in a club or something like that with a very specific goal,
Mm.
if you wanted to know where all the black students lived in a particular dorm, you could go to like whatever office and get like specifically
Mm.
the room numbers and
Wow.
assignments of every black
Yeah,
student, right?
that's kinda scary.
And so, one of my white friends at the State News, her roommate was a black student, right? And
Mm.
so the Black Student Union for that particular dorm is handing out invitations to the next Black Student Alliance meeting, and her roommate gets an invitation, but she doesn't.
Mm.
And so she wrote a column in the State News, basically being like, "Why am I being discriminated against?
Wow.
Because if it's because I'm white, like." And
Hilarious.
it was
That's
extremely tone deaf
crazy.
at the time, but she was,
Yeah.
we were 18, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, we're good friends now, and
Mhm.
we've learned our mistakes. But that was just another like strike against
Yeah.
the student newspaper because like it was like, and there were a couple of other things, but like we were just like we were not winning any favor
Mm.
with the black student population at Michigan State because we just
Mhm.
kept fucking up the
Yeah.
one thing after another. And so the next year, my sophomore year, um, couple of more like, things happened that black students didn't agree with. And the entire Black Student Alliance calls a town hall meeting
Mm.
and they want all the black employees at the State News to come explain themselves on
Wow.
behalf of the paper, right? So it's
Wow,
like
that's some
me and like 3 other
man,
editors and reporters.
that's a pressure moment as a sophomore too, because as a
Yeah.
sophomore, you're not I mean, it's a pressure moment no matter what, but definitely as a sophomore, it's like, damn, because I went through this first year,
Yeah.
and sometimes, you're new. It's like, how much say do I even have to say, yo, don't do that in the first place?
Yeah.
You know?
And so, I'm not gonna
Mhm.
say her name, but she was a officer on the Black Student Alliance board at the
Mhm.
time,
Yeah.
and she went on to do a reality show on
Mm.
Bravo, right? And so
Okay.
I'm flipping channels one day. I'm just like, she called me out during this Black Student Alliance town hall. She called me and the other reporters out. She's like, "Y'all are Uncle Toms. Y'all
Mm.
are bootlickers,
Mm.
and all of this." And she's like, I'm just trying to get this journalism
Yeah.
degree. I'm just trying to work,
Yeah.
and I need to work at this paper to get the
Yeah.
experience. It was it was kind of a turning point for me
Mhm.
because like, this is, your first taste of like,
How
um,
people interpret a lot of things in media, and
yeah,
oftentimes, I mean, Lord knows, even when
yeah,
Detroit is different, it's left or right. It's
yeah,
and oftentimes, even as you uplift this,
yeah,
like especially now because the news cycle so fast, like
yeah,
you don't even know how something may
yeah,
land,
yeah,
because a person, does this or says that. I look back at definitely a lot of old stuff, and it's like, yeah, I know, yeah. If ever I run for office, somebody gonna
yeah.
be like, look at this.
But you know what?
Mm.
I grew up with my mother as a journalist.
Yeah,
This was not a problem or issue she prepared me for because
yeah,
she was working at a black newspaper in a majority black city,
and and and,
and and
and
so
also, I think
they're not having these type of conversations at the Chronicle, right? And so
And also, I think even at the time, in the format of how people engage,
yeah,
it wouldn't be in like in that same arc. It would be like probably like more of a formal letter in the editorial.
hmm
Whereas now, this goes back to the where we at in content and social. And I'm not saying that in 2004 we're all the way there, but it's heading there
hmm
towards um I mean, it starts moving because that's even an era. I know you guys, I mean, especially with President Trump or something, but like, my first election is the George W. Gore
Oh
election as I
boy,
vote for that.
I
But
forgot about
right
that.
at that point, things start like just drastically
Mm,
changing because you had, I mean, at the time, I'm like looking at Jon Stewart just saying, president's an idiot. And
mm,
like, and just like but before that, you wouldn't, as much as black people didn't like Ronald Reagan or George Bush's father, it was still like, hey, it just never would be framed like that. But things really started, I think, taking a shift and change early 2000s a lot with the W election. And I ain't necessarily saying that, some of those statements ain't stuff that I stand by now, but
mm.
it would have never been delivered like that by a classic Detroiter, by like Ed Gordon or something at that time.
You know what I remember, a memory that sticks out to me? I
Mhm.
can't remember if it was freshman year or sophomore year, but, um, the class structure does not exist anymore, but we had to take a required course called American Thought and Language,
Mhm.
and, it's the equivalent of, like, a social studies class pretty much, um but, it's like sociology and stuff like that mixed in as well. But, we've got all our desk in a circle, and our professor somehow we get on this would have been like 2003, I think. And somehow we get on the concept of like Detroit and the suburbs.
Mhm.
And there's like 4 black students, myself included, from Detroit, and there
Mhm.
are a bunch of white people from,
Yeah. Wherever.
the surrounding
Only come
suburbs and
in for
stuff
a
like that.
game.
And this white kid from Grosse Pointe said, man, like, you're driving down, he's I can't remember if he said Alter or Jefferson. He was like, man, you're driving down Alter, and all of a sudden it's just like burned out houses and
Mhm.
da 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 and burnt out businesses. And like, us 4 black students, like, I grew up in Rosedale Park. I grew up over here in Russell
Yeah.
Woods. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like,
Yeah.
ain't no burned out houses in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
It was this debate and
Mhm.
battle. And a lot of folks just had so many, all of the white suburban kids had like all of the, think of like the most stereotypical things anybody has ever said about Detroit, right?
Yeah.
And then frame it from the point of view of somebody's like 18 or 19 and grew up in like in
Yeah.
St. Clair Shores or something like that. Um, it was that was I mean, that was a turning point for me too, because I was just like, I'm getting, like I'm finding myself having to defend Detroit
Yeah.
at every turn. Now, granted, like, at that point you're missing full context. Like, I'm going around telling people like, ain't no abandoned houses in my neighborhood. Ain't
Yeah.
I grew up good, but I also grew up off Dexter, right?
Mhm.
I'm leaving out the part that like that like, um, you know, there's no abandoned houses on my block. If you go 2 blocks over, you know,
Mhm.
I've evolved and I've gotten older, explaining, like
The
how
nuance.
the nuance and how
Mhm.
neighborhoods work and stuff like that. But, you know, I spent a lot of time at Michigan State just kind of like explaining, I can't speak for everyone, but my life in
Yeah.
Detroit wasn't so bad.
And
You
then
know,
and that's a heavy thing that I think a lot of young black people get into, because it's tough. Like you're just in a class. I mean, when I was at recording school, I always would joke. It's like you walk in a class and being like the one black person. Now
yep,
it's like, damn,
yeah,
I got to be like Jesse Jackson or
mm,
something. You know what I'm saying? I got to
yeah,
be, you know what I'm saying? Like I am the representative
yeah,
for whatever. And it's like, oh, so you black people like M&Ms, and it's like,
yeah.
no, we don't like M&Ms.
And
I just like them. And some of this is incepted, but all
mhm,
these different things, and I'm sure that this goes for whatever group is underrepresented, whatever it may be. And just the layers of it,
yeah,
it definitely takes, I think, time to just grow old enough to say, sometimes, at least me, now it's like, hey, I'll let you live in your ignorance.
yeah,
A lot of, I've definitely been in the room right now to say, well, now that they got it black, meaning now that Detroit has black executive leadership as a mayor, it ain't gonna be the same.
yeah.
So it's like, hey, if you want to, if that's how you feel, I'm not about to sit and argue a lot of the the experience of a Mayor Sheffield and everything and what she represents and why that connects well. It's like, you want to live in this ignorance, live in this ignorance. I'll save myself the time.
I thought about like how that Black Student Alliance meeting where, they called the few Black state news employees to the
Yeah.
carpet and explained themselves. You know, that's that moment you realize, like I'm in this position
Yeah.
of having to, y- having to explain
Mhm.
blackness to my, white coworkers at the
Yep.
student paper, but also having to represent this entire student body.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's 6,000 Black people,
Yeah.
on this campus. I'm the representative for this community, but is not necessarily my job title,
No.
but here I am,
It
like in this position, and
it's incepted.
yeah,
Mhm.
and as going on, post degree in my professional life, multiple times I've been,
Mhm.
one or one of two, except, I can count the number of times when I was not the only Black person, and that was when I was working at, when I was editor of Black magazine,
That would make sense.
when I was working at the city,
Mhm.
as chief storyteller
That makes
in
sense.
in the media services department, and we were all. I loved working there so much.
Mhm.
We were, we would say things that like we could not repeat on anywhere, and that would embarrass our white mayor boss. But like, like we had something like in intercultural
Mhm.
conversations that like I was just like I'm home. This is comfortable,
Yeah.
but this cannot leave. This cannot.
Yeah.
And now at the Chronicle, but I've worked I've worked at a lot of great places. And I've never had like a bad experience in
Mhm.
any professional setting I've worked at, as a journalist. But more often than not, I've had to be that representative. I've had to
Yeah.
be that explainer, and honestly, a lot of that stuff was forged at Michigan State. Like, like I said earlier, didn't know I was in a Black city till I came to East Lansing, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's not like I'd never seen white people before. I mean, it's a couple of interracial marriages in my family, but
Mhm.
you know, I'm coming to Michigan State excited, for this next phase of my life, and I'm getting questions about like, do I even belong here, right? And
Yeah.
so that kind of, that sticks with you. That
Yeah,
sticks with
on both ends, and
you.
it's tough because those are the layers, especially like when you're younger and you just learn how to navigate some of those spaces.
Mhm,
And because
mhm,
yeah, I mean, like even and that's why sometimes other art and storytelling it connects so well because I mean, Invisible Man stands out because of things like that. But even like the class, Get Out, like when the
mhm.
father first meets, I forget the character's name or whatever. He's like, yeah, we will vote for him again, and talking about Barack Obama. And I mean, you sit in moments like that, and this is what's so tough because it's like, okay, I'm a human being,
Mhm.
but also Black, also a Black man. So it's like, are we gonna, you know what I'm saying? I appreciate that you supported his, his election and
Mhm.
candidacy, but like, are we gonna live in this conversation the whole
Mhm.
time, or like where does this go? Like sometimes it's layers and a lot of these nuances, and that's usually where I mean now it's like the
Yeah.
microaggressions, and and what you may perceive as one versus I perceive as one could be completely different. Just also due to the background in which how we connect. That classic Chappelle show skit where where he starts singing "Every Rose Has its Thorns," and then the Black guy says, "I grew up in the suburbs." You know what I'm saying? So it's like
Let me tell you about being a Black man in journalism.
Mhm.
If you think of a Black male journalist, you are likely thinking of a TV anchor first. You're thinking of like
Hilarious.
you're thinking like a Emery King or somebody
And I
like that.
like Emory, but
Yeah.
the tough thing
Yeah.
about some of the Black journalists is like they gotta have the journalist voice, and it's like, I
Yeah.
know you don't really sound like that all the time. I mean, I know
Yeah.
you're not, now I can't say this, and I got love for him too. He cool. Hugh Perkins,
Yes.
he sounds like he
Yeah.
sounds,
Yeah.
but it doesn't sound like artificial. But some, it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
how are we doing in the news today?
Yeah.
And it's like,
But, like, like, there's a lot of Black male journalists on
mhm,
TV, but God help us, the ones that are not on TV. So, because
mhm,
like, my career has been in print. My career has
mhm,
been in print and magazines and
yeah,
digital and stuff like that. I'll never forget, I had an internship,
mm,
a newspaper internship, this would have been my junior year, I think,
mhm,
at the Jackson Citizen Patriot.
mm.
At that time, the rules have shifted so much, and they started changing right after I walked off the
As in
stage.
Jackson, Michigan.
But, yeah, Jackson, Michigan.
Okay.
In order, the sort of unspoken rule was like, you start you do at Michigan State you do the state news if you want to do print, and you do focal point if you want to do broadcast,
Mhm.
and you do your internships in the summer or the spring, and you work your way up. You get your first internship at a small paper, like let's say Flint Journal, Saginaw News, but like let's think about our smaller cities in Michigan, right? The newspaper there,
Mhm.
and then you work your way up to the free
Larger
press
papers.
in the news,
Yeah.
or in some cases like USA Today, New
Yeah.
York Times, Wall Street Journal, right? And so I had an early internship at the Jackson Citizen Patriot.
Mhm.
Now there are black people in Jackson,
Many,
black
actually.
residents in Jackson,
Yep.
and a lot, but the majority of black residents in Jackson are in prison, right?
Yep.
So let's keep that in mind. But
Mhm.
I am a 6'2" black male.
Mhm.
Um, and I've gotten more like, can you play basketball? Like questions in my life.
Mhm.
I played Rosedale Grandma youth league 2 years
Okay.
in middle school, and that was it.
I got you.
I don't have the best,
I got you.
but the 6'2" black male in journalism. When I was at the Jackson Citizen Patriot, they make interns do this thing we call in the field man on the street. And you are, your editor assigns you to like go ask like, and it's a dog and pony show. You have to ask like 6 to 8 strangers a topic of the day. What do you think about the mayor saying
Mhm.
this? What do you think about you know, uh George Bush saying this
Yeah.
on TV or something like that? And you have to get their picture, right?
Mhm.
Um More than once I got asked to do man on the street. And now I'm a 6'2" black dude. Every time I approach an older white woman,
Mhm.
I've got a reporter's notebook
Yeah.
in one hand. I am, at the time I had like a wool pea coat,
Mhm.
and I'm dressed for work, right? I have on
Mhm.
like a button-down shirt and khakis and stuff like that. You know, I'd be like, "Hi, excuse me. My name's Aaron. I'm from the Jackson Citizen Patriot." They start clutching their purses
Yep.
and clutching their like,
Mhm.
all tensed up, and it's like, I'm a reporter for the
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And I had to kind of put on this, you do a weird kind of code switch in terms of like,
Yeah.
I stand this tall, but I gotta like come at you with a
Yeah.
baby voice like this because I'm just true
Yeah. You
reporting for the
trying to
newspaper.
not. Yeah.
And like, there's never been a time in my life where I've seen uh, some, I've never seen a woman like clutch her purse around me
Mhm.
growing up in Detroit, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and so that kind of sticks with me too. And it's also just kind of funny, just, um, even now, when I introduce myself, and the inevitable question like, "What do you do?" Writer, journalist is sort of the last thing people expect.
Mhm.
I'm not saying there's like, if you're a certain height in a certain color or whatever, like you
Mhm.
you know gravitate towards a lot of things, but I think people assume like, they might think I'm an engineer,
Mhm.
or they might think I'm like an IT or something that like,
Yeah.
they've seen like 4 other of their black friends
Mhm.
do and stuff like that, but people are surprised. They're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
oh,"
Creative space.
yeah.
Mhm.
It happens a lot in the bookstores,
Yeah.
um where like, now certain bookstores. I'll go into stores, booksellers. I'm at home.
Okay. Shout out to Janet and them.
You know what I mean.
Yeah. Love
But like,
love
when I
Allison and Jen.
travel to other cities,
Yeah.
right, like I kind of get this like, you know how you feel it sometimes, like,
Mhm.
people are just like, "Do you know what you're looking for? Are you
Yeah.
lost?" They're kind of like hesitant to ask
Mhm.
like if you need like help or something like that. And it's just like, I'm a published author.
Mm.
I got some of these people on your shelf in my
Yeah.
phone, right? And so
Mm.
like, like I came here to browse. I know what I'm looking for, but I don't wanna say they get a lot of customers like me. I'm not saying that, like, no black men ever go into a bookstore, but it just, more often than not, I always get that,
Mm.
like, you know are you in the right place, sir? You
That's
know,
that
that kind of thing,
that
right? And so
that definitely lands on a couple points. On a couple points that that definitely get real. That definitely gets real. Like I always say, it's it's so interesting when people talk about safe spaces. Brought this up on Detroit is Different so many times. It's like the space where most people say they feel the safest as a black man is probably the place where I feel not the safest.
mhm.
And nothing would be scarier than like even, hood interpersonal conflicts. Cause I feel like I can navigate this more than like a white woman saying I'm uncomfortable around me.
Mhm.
Like that might as well be for other people, I guess it would be like walking in a room with a bunch of black men or something. Because to me, that's like, oh, this historically, I mean, from the fiction of To Kill a Mockingbird to the realism of Emmett Till and God knows, I mean, whoever yesterday, you know what I'm saying? That is like, even that whole like me, white woman, elevator, you'd be like, ah. It's like, how fast do I really got to get to this hotel room? Because this could go left. This could go left.
It's so sad that like we always gotta like read the room before
Yeah. Yep.
we come in and stuff like that. Um, it's
Yeah, I mean, but it's real.
yeah.
But with it, as we get to a close here, and I definitely got to bring you back. So much more, right? And I definitely want to talk about what you wrote for young men. That's deep. I gotta bring you back for that. But the Chronicle now, you're there at the Chronicle, and I saw your story. I even saw like the first story. I love what you wrote about the dress for
Yeah.
Barry Sheffield. I thought that was real fly. And even the way this is back to like the nuance of stuff, because even though it's a fashion statement, it contextualizes of like, let's start definitely giving grace for the beauty that is, but also honor for what that is, the
Mhm.
way that we could definitely lean into something. So I thought that was phenomenal from an artistic lens and a cultural lens for cultural competency and so many other things.
Yeah.
But you're there at the Chronicle. What's your vision? What's your thought process of some of the things that you see moving forward with it? And also, I got the creative Sam over there too.
Oh, Sam. Shout out to Sam. Like,
Yes.
Sam's career kind of almost mirrored, like, he's a generation younger than me, but like,
it's a lot of similarities.
yeah,
Yes,
and
yes.
this is where like, oh, I'm at this, I welcome it, but it's just like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm getting old now.
Uh-huh.
I'm at the age where like I can be the mentor. I'm
Uh-huh.
at the age where I can give back. Um, like I said, I had great experiences in the beginning of my career and
Mhm.
as a young professional,
Yep.
but I was, I didn't really have, my mother, of course, and all of her colleagues at the Chronicle, but I was kind of like, sometimes the only black person in the newsroom, but I didn't
Yeah.
really have anybody looking out for me.
Mm,
You know what I'm
that's
saying?
big.
It's just like I would go to NABJ meetings
Mhm.
and stuff like that, but I didn't, I didn't have that person to like,
Yeah.
take my shoulder and like
Mhm.
kind of like give me a helping hand and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Um, and so years later, I see Sam come along.
Mhm.
I worked at MLive in the beginning of my career. Sam was at MLive
Yes.
at the beginning of his career.
Mhm.
I was very vocal on social media when I was Sam's age. Sam is twice as
Extreme.
vocal
Yes, extreme.
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
And a Substack
yeah.
too.
But, but the difference is just like I see where Sam is going because I've been there.
Mhm.
Right. And so, I've reached, a couple of years ago, like, I think he's still in Kalamazoo or something at the
Uh-huh.
time. I reached out to him and like, I wasn't trying to like big brother him or nothing
Yeah.
like that or try to check him or something like that. But I was just like, hey, I see you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I
what's up.
see you. And like, and
Keep grinding.
yeah, and so, I have the pleasure of working with him. My vision at the Chronicle is, um, when I wrote that piece about Mayor Sheffield and what she was wearing, I was like, what kind of stories? Chronicle has always told stories
Mhm.
differently, but
Yeah.
like I'm really thinking like, what are the things that like you can only read this
Yeah.
in,
Here.
in the Chronicle.
I like it.
Mary Sheffield, I'm just going to use her as an example because it's just
Mhm.
top of mind right now. Every time she does a press conference, no matter what, we're all gonna write that same story. Like, she's announcing this, she's
Mhm.
announcing that, right? But what kind of things
Mhm.
about the mayoral administration? What type of things about we're looking at the statewide races right now,
Mhm.
and um, you know, I kept raising the question. I was like, I'm looking at Garland running for governor. I was just like, are people in the UP, are people upstate going vote for this, vote for this man? Like, and so now he's in the Secretary of State race. But like, we need to be having those conversations about, black executives at the statewide level, and,
Mhm.
and why they just cannot launch the
Mhm.
same way.
Yeah.
Um, those types of conversations, in coverage in the Chronicle is one thing I'm looking forward to. Um, another thing is like, I'm looking at the state of journalism now and like the many different ways people are either, internally how newsrooms are building their staff, and externally how, different newsrooms are communicating with the audience around them.
Yeah.
Um, the Free Press and the News, they had the JOA, and then
Mhm.
now they're separate and stuff like that. And they
Yeah.
both came out with guns blazing. Like they're each of their editors each wrote a letter, saying like, we're gonna, do this, we're gonna do this. Free Press,
I mean,
we're
it's
we're we're gonna do this, right?
the let's put it like this, the
Yeah,
perception that I think
mm,
a lot of black folks definitely have always had about
yeah,
both papers,
yeah,
it's clear
yeah,
because, I remember I was looking I often look, it's like,
yeah,
okay, you open the Free
yeah,
Press, oh, man, charges possibly for President Trump,
yeah,
open news, a black judge, a 36 district court charge,
yeah,
like, it's like, oh,
yeah,
okay. Now it's like
yeah,
gloves are off. Now
yeah.
we really see.
And so, I'm approaching my time at the Chronicle
Mhm,
with like, I'm looking at this, I'm looking at what the
mhm.
news is doing, and I'm
Yeah,
looking at what the Free Press is doing, not to follow their model, but I'm looking at what they're not doing.
yeah.
Um, I, with Sam Robinson, for example, like I want to, I want to see if we can create a space where we can launch, the next great generation of black journalists, right?
Wow.
I do not, I've had conversations with people at both papers.
Mhm.
I'm like, there are black journalists out here that want to work for you all, but you all make them jump through hoops and
Yeah.
all that type of stuff just to get a little internship or whatever.
Mhm. Yeah.
I just don't think the investment is there. And so, so where can we as a black paper, or where can some other publications, where can we collaborate to, get that next generation of writers, give folks a portfolio and stuff like that, and make them stand out,
Mhm.
make them, I admire what Sam does in terms of like he's made a name for himself, right?
Yeah.
And so, how do we follow that model? Another thing is, the Free Press, like, oh, we're going to cover this, and news is we're going to cover this, and this. You know, uh, what you read in the newspaper, you'll forget the next day, right? And so I have always gravitated towards, something like, you can't do it every single time, but like, I want to write stuff that people will still be talking about for a while.
Mhm.
And so, I applied, I've done that with a lot of my writing in terms of
Mhm.
like, I want this to stick out in people's minds so much that they keep referring back
Mm.
to this. I want people to use this in their research if they're doing a dissertation or something like that.
Mm.
I want pieces that stand the test of time because, um, you know, reporters are very hardworking. I'm not saying journalists aren't doing their job.
Mhm.
If you're just filing byline after byline after byline,
Yeah.
and it's and no one is like absorbing it and keeping it with them. Like could you be doing something that like people stick with? And so I had applied that mentality to writing about Mary Sheffield's outfit.
Yeah.
Like who am I to like critique what somebody is
Hilarious.
wearing, right? But like I was taking a hard look at it. I
Mhm.
was just like, she is standing out from everybody else in the crowd, and you have all these different layers of like, she's a product of the church, and there's the symbolism there, but also just this enlarged conversation that has happened everywhere else about Detroit in terms of like Michelle Obama has to deal with this, Kamala Harris has to deal with this, Jasmine Crockett has to deal with this. Now we're having this conversation in Detroit. And, I can't imagine a white woman at the Free Press breaking down like what it's like to be a black woman, on this stage. But I bet the black newspaper can. So, yeah.
So I think that's a phenomenal, like I say, when I saw it, I was like, okay, this is different. And that's a very creative way to introduce it all. So I definitely look forward to seeing more, because I know it's way more ideas and just the way that it'll navigate an arc, and definitely you being there is going to be something. So,
and if there are any program officers at any of the local foundations listening that
they want to connect,
like
I got you. I actually, we're gonna ride back, but I got something actually that it may fit automatically. I was having a meeting with one of those foundations last week, and I'm rare to meet with foundations and stuff like that, but Detroit is different. So with that, we close. Classic Detroit is different questions for you now. Your very first car, year, make, and model, year you got it.
2004 Focus. It was a hand-me-down. I think I got in 2003.
Okay. Where's the first place you went when you got it?
It wasn't in Detroit because I was in college. So I think East Lansing.
Okay, so you drove straight to school. Okay, there we go. All right. You're the DJ at the end of the fireworks. Woodward and Jefferson. You get to play 2 songs. What songs you playing?
Ooh. Feel So Right by Janet Jackson.
Okay.
And I gotta make a good one. End of the fireworks. First Day Out.
Okay.
That's an easy choice, right?
Okay.
But like, I'm being here all day.
Michigan State. We love T. Grease.
Exactly. You don't hear Bursley. You don't hear Alice Lloyd. We was moving that work in Hubbard. Like,
I got you. All right, and close with this one. You could rename Detroit, rename Woodward after one street, one Detroiter. Who would you name it?
Oh. Rename Woodward?
Yep. One Detroit.
It can't be like Brush or
Yep.
Oh God. Well, I mean, do I say Goldman Young? Like
that is he gets the most votes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if we're talking like if you say like another street, I have plenty of people. Like you're talking about the main street, so I got to go with the main character.
All right,
it's either got to be Coleman Young or John Conyers. I mean,
okay.
Ooh, yeah, Coleman Young.
Okay, he definitely gets a lot of votes, and Congressman Conyers does as well.
Yeah.
With that being said, thank you so much.
Oh, I should have said Aretha.
Oh, she has some votes too.
I was like, they gonna think I'm misogynistic.
Hilarious. Hilarious. Aretha gets a lot of votes too.
Yeah.
Aretha definitely gets a lot of votes. Pink Cadillac and all of that.
Yeah.
Love it. That being said, peace.
Detroit is different. Yeah, Detroit is ballin'. Detroit is different. Yeah, Detroit is different.